The sun bled crimson across the Wyoming Territory horizon when Fiona Porter watched her wedding dreams shatter like glass on a saloon floor. The year was 1879, and standing in her white dress, a creation her mother had spent months sewing by oil lamp, Fiona felt the weight of public humiliation crush her spirit as Harrison Wells announced to everyone gathered that he couldn't marry her after all. "I just don't love you, Fiona," he said flatly, as though discussing the weather rather than destroying her life before half the county. "Truth is, I never did." The collective gasp from the small crowd gathered outside the white clapboard church in Sweetwater might have been comical if it weren't tearing her heart to ribbons. Fiona's mother crumpled against her father, whose face had gone the color of thunderclouds. The preacher closed his Bible with a snap that seemed to echo across the dusty town square. "Harrison, you cannot mean this," Fiona whispered, her voice trembling like aspen leaves in autumn. "The arrangements? Our home." But Harrison's eyes, those blue eyes she'd once thought kind, remained cold as Wyoming winter. "Beatrice Holloway's father offered me a partnership in his freight business if I marry his daughter instead. I'm sorry, Fiona, but a man's got to think about his future." Someone in the crowd cursed. Another woman began to weep. Fiona stood frozen, her bouquet of wildflowers and prairie roses hanging limply at her side. "You promised," she said, her voice stronger now, anger beginning to burn beneath her shock. "You promised me, Harrison." "Promises change." Harrison adjusted his string tie, not even meeting her eyes. "You'll find someone else." "Someone else?" The words tasted like dust in her mouth. "We were to be married today." He simply shrugged, turned, and walked away, leaving her standing alone before the church steps. The shame burned worse than any physical pain Fiona had ever known. The pity in people's eyes as they shuffled uncomfortably, uncertain whether to approach her or leave her to her humiliation, was unbearable. Her parents moved toward her mother's face wet with tears, but Fiona couldn't bear their comfort, not now. "Don't," she said, holding up a trembling hand. "Please, just don't." And then, in a move that would later be whispered about in every parlor and saloon in Sweetwater for years to come, Fiona Porter kicked off the dainty white satin slippers her father had ordered all the way from Denver, hitched up her wedding dress, and began walking away from the church, away from the town, away from everything she knew. "Fiona," her mother cried, "where are you going?" But Fiona didn't answer. She couldn't. The only thing she knew was that she needed to get away from the church, from the people, from Harrison's casual cruelty. Her bare feet carried her down the main street, past the general store where curious faces pressed against the windows, past the saloon where men paused mid-drink to stare, and finally to the edge of town where the road stretched toward the distant mountains. The rocky ground bit into her tender feet, but the physical pain was almost welcome, something real to focus on, rather than the hollow ache in her chest. She walked without direction, her wedding dress collecting dust and burrs, tears making silent tracks through the dirt on her face. She didn't know how long she walked. The sun climbed higher, then began its slow descent, painting the landscape in gold. Her feet were bleeding now, small crimson footprints marking her passage across the hard earth. Still, she walked on, as though she could somehow outpace her heartbreak. Miss, are you all right?" The voice came so unexpectedly that Fiona startled, nearly losing her footing on the uneven ground. She looked up, shielding her eyes against the late afternoon sun, to see a man on horseback regarding her with obvious concern. He sat tall in the saddle, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the sky, his face shadowed beneath a wide-brimmed hat. "I'm fine," she said automatically, the lie tasting bitter on her tongue. "Just walking." The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion, his spurs jingling as his boots hit the ground. He was tall, taller than Harrison, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of aged whiskey. A leather vest hung open over his cotton shirt, and a bandana was knotted loosely around his neck. "Begging your pardon, madam, but you don't look fine." His voice was deep, with a hint of a southern drawl. "You're barefoot, you're bleeding, and unless I'm mistaken, that's a wedding dress you're wearing." Fiona glanced down at herself, suddenly seeing the state she was in through a stranger's eyes. Her once pristine dress was filthy, torn in places where she'd pushed through brush. Her bare feet were cut and bruised, caked with dust and blood. She must have looked like a madwoman. "The wedding didn't happen," she said, her voice cracking on the words. The stranger's expression softened. "I gathered as much." He glanced back toward town, then at the empty road ahead, then at Fiona again. "Where are you headed?" Fiona laughed, a brittle sound with no humor in it. "I have no idea." "Well, you can't keep walking like this. You'll cripple yourself." He stepped closer, and Fiona caught the scent of leather and horses and something clean, like soap. "My name's Owen Young. I've got a ranch about 5 miles west of here." "Fiona Porter," she replied automatically, then wondered why she'd bothered. What did names matter now? Owen nodded, as though her name confirmed something for him. "Miss Porter, I don't mean to be forward, but you need help. Let me take you somewhere safe back to town, or to your family." "No." The word burst from her more forcefully than she'd intended. "Not back there. Not yet." Owen studied her for a long moment, his eyes thoughtful. Then he nodded once, decisively. "All right. My sister Rebecca lives at my ranch. She can tend to your feet, get you something to eat. Then we'll figure out what's next." Fiona hesitated. She'd been raised to be cautious around strangers, especially men. But there was something steady in Owen Young's gaze, something that spoke of reliability and honor. "Why would you help me?" she asked. "Because you need it," he said simply. "And because my mother would haunt me from her grave if I left a lady in distress alone on this road." Despite everything, Fiona felt a ghost of a smile touch her lips. "Your mother sounds like a wise woman." "The wisest," Owen agreed. He gestured toward his horse, a handsome chestnut gelding that stood patiently nearby. "Now, will you let me help you, Miss Porter? Those feet of yours aren't going to carry you much further." Fiona looked down at her battered feet, then back at the road she'd traveled. She couldn't go back. Not yet. And she couldn't keep walking. Pride warred briefly with practicality before surrendering. "Thank you, Mr. Young." Owen nodded, then led his horse closer. "I'll help you up." Before she could respond, he placed his hands at her waist and lifted her as easily as if she weighed nothing, setting her sideways on his saddle. Fiona gasped, as much from the unexpected strength in his hands as from the strange intimacy of being lifted by a man she'd just met. Owen swung up behind her in one smooth motion, his chest warm against her back, his arms reaching around her to take the reins. "Hold on," he murmured, his breath stirring the loose tendrils of hair at her temple. As the horse began to move, carrying them away from the road and across the open country, Fiona found herself leaning back against Owen's solid presence. Exhaustion washed over her suddenly, the events of the day catching up all at once. "Rest if you need to," Owen said, as though reading her thoughts. "I won't let you fall." And though she'd met him only moments ago, though her heart was still raw and bleeding from Harrison's betrayal, Fiona believed him. As the rhythmic motion of the horse lulled her, she closed her eyes, letting her head rest against the steady beat of Owen Young's heart. In that moment, with the Wyoming wilderness stretching around them and the setting sun painting the world in gold and crimson, Fiona Porter did something she would have thought impossible earlier that day. She surrendered to the strange comfort of a cowboy's protection and allowed herself, just for a moment, to rest. The Young ranch appeared on the horizon as the last light was fading from the sky. Fiona had dozed against Owen's chest for much of the journey, her body surrendering to exhaustion despite her best efforts to stay alert. She roused herself as they approached a sturdy log house nestled among cottonwood trees, with outbuildings and corrals extending behind it. "This is Cottonwood Creek Ranch," Owen told her, his voice rumbling against her back. "Not the biggest spread in the territory, but it's home." Fiona straightened, suddenly conscious of how intimate their position had become during the ride. "It looks lovely." A lantern glowed in the front window, and as they approached, the door swung open. A woman stepped onto the porch, shading her eyes against the gathering darkness. "Owen, that you?" she called. "It's me, Becca," Owen answered, guiding his horse to the hitching post near the porch. "And I've brought a guest." Rebecca Young stepped farther into the yard, the lantern she now carried illuminating her features. She was perhaps a few years older than Fiona, with the same whiskey-colored eyes as her brother and hair the shade of burnished copper pulled back in a practical bun. "A guest?" Rebecca's voice held surprise, then concern, as she caught sight of Fiona in her bedraggled wedding dress. "My goodness. What happened?" Owen dismounted first, then reached up to help Fiona down. Her legs trembled as her feet touched the ground, pain shooting through her abused soles. "Easy now," Owen murmured, keeping an arm around her waist when she swayed. "Becca, this is Miss Fiona Porter. She's had a difficult day and needs some assistance." Rebecca's eyes widened with recognition. "Porter? Jacob Porter's daughter? Weren't you supposed to be married today to that Wells fellow?" Fiona flinched. Of course news would have spread quickly, even to outlying ranches. "Yes," she said simply, unable to elaborate further. Rebecca's expression softened with immediate understanding. "I see." She stepped forward, taking Fiona's arm gently. "Well, you come right inside, Miss Porter. We'll get you cleaned up and comfortable." "Thank you," Fiona said, relief washing over her. "I'm sorry to impose—" "Nonsense," Rebecca interrupted firmly. "Any woman left at the altar deserves at least a hot meal and a place to rest." Owen released Fiona to his sister's care. "I'll see to Thunder, then come in." Rebecca guided Fiona up the porch steps and into the house. The interior was modest but welcoming, a large main room with a stone fireplace, sturdy handmade furniture, and colorful rag rugs on the plank floors. Shelves lined one wall, filled with books, and framed drawings hung on another. The air smelled of pine and something savory cooking. "Let's get you settled by the fire," Rebecca said, leading Fiona to a rocking chair near the hearth. "Then I'll fetch some warm water for those feet." Fiona sank into the chair gratefully. Now that she was no longer moving, her feet throbbed mercilessly, and exhaustion pressed upon her like a physical weight. "I'm truly sorry to trouble you," she began, but Rebecca waved away her apology. "Owen did right bringing you here. You're in no condition to be anywhere else tonight." She moved efficiently around the room, retrieving a basin and towels. "I'll heat some water and find you something clean to wear. You look to be about my size." Left alone briefly, Fiona gazed around the room, noting the signs of a comfortable, if modest, life. Photographs on the mantel showed a stern-faced couple, presumably Owen and Rebecca's parents, as well as a younger Owen in what appeared to be a Union Army uniform. So he'd fought in the war between the states. That would make him older than she'd initially thought, perhaps in his mid-30s. Rebecca returned with a steaming basin of water and knelt before Fiona. "This might sting a bit," she warned, gently lifting one of Fiona's feet and placing it in the water. Fiona hissed as the warm water touched her raw skin, but the pain quickly gave way to relief. Rebecca worked silently, washing away the dirt and blood, then patting her feet dry and applying a pungent salve that smelled of herbs. "Arnica and calendula," Rebecca explained. "Good for bruises and cuts." The front door opened and Owen entered, removing his hat and hanging it on a peg by the door. His eyes immediately sought Fiona, a silent question in their depths. She'll be right as rain after some food and rest, Rebecca assured him. She wrapped soft strips of cloth around Fiona's feet and stood. Now, I've got a stew that's been simmering all day, and I just took bread from the oven. Let's get some food into both of you. Owen washed up at a basin near the door, then joined them at the simple oak table. Rebecca ladled generous portions of stew into earthenware bowls and sliced thick pieces of crusty bread. The rich aroma made Fiona's stomach growl embarrassingly loudly. "Eat," Owen encouraged with a small smile. Rebecca's stew is the best in 3 counties. Fiona didn't need further invitation. She ate ravenously, suddenly aware that she'd had nothing since a nervous cup of tea at dawn. The stew was indeed delicious tender beef, carrots, and potatoes in a savory broth seasoned with herbs. As they ate, Rebecca gently steered the conversation away from Fiona's predicament, instead telling stories about recent ranch happenings, a new foal born last week, the trouble with coyotes getting into the chicken coop, the bumper crop of apples expected from their small orchard. "Owen's been expanding the ranch bit by bit," Rebecca explained. "Started with just 20 acres when he came back from the war, and now we're up to nearly 200. It's not much compared to some of the big outfits," Owen said modestly. "But it's good land, and we've got enough water rights to see us through the dry spells." Fiona found herself relaxing as they talked, the simple domesticity of the meal soothing her frayed nerves. These people were strangers, yet there was something comfortable about their presence, something that felt like sanctuary after the chaos of the day. After dinner, Rebecca showed Fiona to a small bedroom off the main room. "It's not fancy, but the bed's clean and comfortable," she said, placing a folded nightgown and robe on the quilt. "There's washing water in the pitcher, and a chamber pot under the bed if you need it." "Thank you," Fiona said, emotion suddenly thick in her throat. "For everything." Rebecca squeezed her hand. "Get some rest. Tomorrow is a new day, and things always look different in the morning light." Left alone, Fiona removed her ruined wedding dress with shaking hands. The garment that had represented so many hopes now seemed like a cruel joke. She folded it carefully. Nonetheless, her mother's hours of work deserved respect, even if Harrison Wells did not, and set it aside. The borrowed nightgown was soft with age and many washings. Fiona slipped it over her head, then sat on the edge of the bed, the events of the day finally catching up to her fully. Tears came then, silent at first, then in great gulping sobs that she muffled with a pillow to avoid disturbing her hosts. She cried for her lost dreams, for the public humiliation, for the uncertainty of her future. She cried until she had no tears left, until exhaustion dragged her down into the darkness of sleep. In the main room, Owen sat by the fire, a cup of coffee cooling forgotten in his hand. "What do you make of it?" he asked Rebecca, who was mending a shirt by lamplight. "That Wells fellow always did seem the opportunistic sort," Rebecca replied, her needle flashing in the firelight. "Jumping at Holloway's offer doesn't surprise me, though doing it at the altar certainly shows a special kind of cowardice." Owen's jaw tightened. "Her family must be worried sick." "No doubt, but she clearly wasn't ready to face them." Rebecca set her mending aside. "She needed space to breathe, Owen. You did right by bringing her here." "What happens tomorrow?" Rebecca smiled slightly. "That's up to her. But if I know anything about Fiona Porter, it's that she's got more steel in her spine than most folks realize. She'll find her way." Owen nodded, his thoughts on the woman sleeping under his roof, the woman whose quiet dignity in the face of heartbreak had stirred something protective in him from the moment he'd seen her walking barefoot and broken on that dusty road. "Get some sleep," Rebecca advised, rising from her chair. "Morning comes early, and those horses won't feed themselves." As Owen banked the fire for the night, his last thoughts before sleep were of Fiona Porter's tear-stained face and the strange conviction that had settled in his chest that somehow fate had placed her in his path for a reason. Dawn broke with the gentle persistence of early summer, pale gold light filtering through the simple muslin curtains of Fiona's borrowed room. For a moment upon waking, she experienced the blissful confusion of unfamiliar surroundings before memory crashed back with brutal clarity. Yesterday's events, Harrison's rejection, her flight from town, it all returned with such force that she had to close her eyes against a fresh wave of pain. The soft sounds of movement beyond her door reminded her where she was, the young ranch, where strangers had shown her more kindness than her own betrothed. The thought steadied her, and Fiona forced herself to sit up, wincing as her feet touched the floor. The bandages Rebecca had applied were still in place, though stained with spots of blood where her cuts had seeped during the night. A gentle knock sounded at her door. "Miss Porter?" Rebecca's voice was low, considerate of early morning quiet. "Are you awake?" "Yes," Fiona called. "Please, come in." Rebecca entered bearing a pitcher of steaming water and a bundle of clothing. "I thought you might like to freshen up," she said, setting the pitcher on the washstand. "And I've brought some things for you to wear. They're nothing fancy, but they'll be more practical than your other garment." Fiona glanced at her wedding dress, crumpled in the corner like discarded dreams. "Thank you. I appreciate your kindness." "It's no trouble." Rebecca set down the clothes, a simple blue calico dress, cotton underthings, and wool stockings. "How are your feet this morning?" "Sore," Fiona admitted, "but better than I expected." "Let me have a look after you've washed up. I'll change those bandages." Rebecca moved toward the door, then paused. "Owen's already out seeing to the stock, but he'll be in for breakfast soon. Take your time." Left alone, Fiona washed quickly, the warm water reviving her spirits somewhat. The borrowed dress fit reasonably well, though it was slightly loose in the bodice and a bit short at the ankles. She managed to comb her tangled hair into some semblance of order and secure it at the nape of her neck, with pins Rebecca had thoughtfully provided. When she emerged from the bedroom, moving gingerly on her injured feet, she found Rebecca at the stove, frying bacon. The fragrant scent of coffee filled the cabin. "There you are," Rebecca said warmly. "Sit down and let me see those feet before breakfast." Fiona obeyed, settling into a chair while Rebecca knelt to remove the soiled bandages. The woman's touch was gentle as she cleaned Fiona's feet again and applied more of her herbal salve. "The cuts aren't too deep," Rebecca pronounced. "Keep off them as much as you can today, and they should heal nicely. You're lucky infection's the real danger with wounds like these." "I wasn't thinking clearly yesterday," Fiona admitted quietly. Rebecca glanced up, her eyes kind. "No one thinks clearly when their heart's been broken." She finished wrapping fresh bandages and stood. "There, that should hold you." The front door opened and Owen entered, bringing with him the scent of morning air and horses. He'd clearly been working for some time. His shirt sleeves were rolled to the elbows, revealing muscular forearms tanned by the sun, and his hair was damp with sweat. He stopped short when he saw Fiona, an expression she couldn't quite read, crossing his features. "Miss Porter, you're up." "Good morning, Mr. Young," she replied, suddenly self-conscious in her borrowed clothes. "I hope I haven't delayed your breakfast." "Not at all." He moved to the wash basin by the door and quickly washed his hands and face. "How are you feeling this morning?" The simple question, asked with genuine concern, nearly undid her composure. "I'm managing," she said carefully, "thanks to your hospitality." Owen nodded, seemingly satisfied with her answer. He joined them at the table as Rebecca served breakfast crisp bacon, eggs fried in the drippings, and leftover bread from the night before, toasted golden brown on the stovetop. "I need to send word to your parents," Owen said after they'd begun eating. "They must be worried sick." Fiona's stomach tightened, but she nodded. "Yes, of course. They deserved better than my disappearing act." "I can ride into town after breakfast," Owen offered. Let them know you're safe and will be returning. When you're ready. The unspoken question hung in the air. When would she be ready? I should go back today, Fiona said, though the thought of facing the town's gossip made her feel physically ill. I've imposed on you enough already. You're not imposing, Rebecca said firmly, and those feet need at least another day of rest before you should be walking on them. Becca's right, Owen agreed. There's no rush. I'll just let your folks know you're safe and being cared for. He hesitated, then added, unless you'd prefer to write a note I could deliver? Fiona considered this option gratefully. Yes, that would be better. Thank you. After breakfast, Rebecca provided paper and a pencil, and Fiona composed a brief message to her parents, explaining where she was and assuring them of her well-being. She made no mention of her plans, having none to speak of. Owen tucked the folded note into his shirt pocket. I've got other business in town as well, so I'll be gone most of the morning. Becca, you'll be all right here? We'll be fine, Rebecca assured him. I've got mending to catch up on, and I thought maybe Fiona could help me with the preserves I started yesterday, if she's feeling up to it. I'd be happy to help, Fiona said quickly, eager to be useful. Owen nodded, satisfied. I'll be back by midday then. He settled his hat on his head, nodded to both women, and was gone. The morning passed peacefully in Rebecca's company. They sat on the porch in the sunshine, Rebecca mending clothes while Fiona, her bandaged feet propped on a low stool, helped prepare strawberries for preserving. The simple work was soothing, and Rebecca proved to be easy company, sharing stories about the ranch and her brother without prying into Fiona's affairs. Owen built most of this place himself, Rebecca told her, gesturing to the cabin and outbuildings. He came back from the war with nothing but his horse and the clothes on his back. Our parents had died while he was away. Influenza took them both within a week of each other. I'm so sorry, Fiona said, genuinely moved. Rebecca nodded, threading a needle with practiced ease. It was hard. I was staying with an aunt in Denver then. Owen wrote me as soon as he got home, said he was going to build something for us. A place of our own. Took him nearly 2 years, but he did it. Started with this cabin, then added on bit by bit. He seems like a determined man, Fiona observed. Stubborn as a mule, Rebecca agreed with affection. But loyal to his bones, the kind of man who stands by his word no matter what. The contrast with Harrison was stark and painful. Fiona concentrated on hulling another strawberry, hoping Rebecca wouldn't notice her sudden discomfort. But little escaped Rebecca's notice. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make comparisons. You didn't, Fiona assured her quickly. It's just, I thought I knew Harrison. We grew up together. Our families were friends. I never imagined he could. She trailed off, unable to complete the thought. Some people hide their true nature well, Rebecca said gently, and some don't know their own hearts until they're tested. They worked in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the snip of Rebecca's scissors and the soft plop of hulled strawberries falling into the wooden bowl. May I ask you something personal? Fiona ventured finally. Of course. Have you ever been married? A shadow crossed Rebecca's face. No. I was engaged once, before the war. Thomas Everett was his name. He joined up with Owen when the call came. Didn't come back. I'm so sorry, Fiona said, ashamed of her prying. It was a long time ago, Rebecca said simply. Not all loves are meant to last a lifetime, I suppose. But some are, Fiona said, thinking of her parents' solid marriage, of older couples she knew who still looked at each other with tenderness after decades together. Yes, Rebecca agreed. Some certainly are. She set her mending aside and stood. Let's get these berries on to cook. The preserves need to simmer for a good while. They moved inside, where Rebecca showed Fiona how to prepare the sugar syrup and add the berries at just the right moment. The sweet, tangy scent filled the cabin as the mixture bubbled gently on the stove. "My mother makes strawberry preserves every summer," Fiona said, a lump forming in her throat at the thought of home. "I used to help her as a little girl." "And you'll help her again," Rebecca said with quiet confidence. "When you're ready." The sound of hoofbeats announced Owen's return shortly after midday. He entered the cabin bearing packages and the scent of town dust. "Smells like summer in here," he remarked, setting his parcels on the table. "Strawberry?" "Fiona's been helping with the preserves," Rebecca confirmed. "How is town?" Owen's eyes met Fiona's briefly. "I delivered your note to your parents. Your mother was particularly relieved." "Were they very angry?" Fiona asked, dreading the answer. "Concerned, not angry," Owen corrected. "Your father asked me to tell you to take all the time you need." He hesitated. "There was quite a lot of talk in town about what happened." Fiona winced. "I can imagine. Actually, you might be surprised." Owen removed his hat, setting it on its peg. "Public opinion seems squarely in your favor. Harrison Wells isn't showing his face much at present." A small, petty part of Fiona was gratified to hear this, though it did little to heal the deeper wound of betrayal. "Did you see him?" she asked, not entirely sure why it mattered. Owen's expression hardened slightly. "Briefly. At the mercantile. He didn't have much to say." Something in his tone made Fiona wonder exactly what had transpired during that encounter, but she didn't press for details. "I brought a few things," Owen continued, changing the subject. "Some coffee, sugar, and—" He reached into one of the packages and withdrew a small jar. "Salve for your feet. The apothecary recommended it." The simple thoughtfulness of the gesture caught Fiona off guard. "Thank you," she said, her voice unexpectedly husky with emotion. Owen cleared his throat. "Rebecca, Mr. Tillman at the general store said to tell you the fabric you ordered came in." Rebecca brightened. "The blue gingham? Excellent. I'll ride in later this week to collect it." They settled around the table for the midday meal, cold chicken left from the previous night, fresh bread, and early summer radishes from Rebecca's kitchen garden. The conversation flowed easily, with Owen sharing news from town and both siblings discussing ranch matters. Fiona found herself drawn into their world, momentarily forgetting her own troubles as she listened to their plans for the upcoming cattle drive and debates about whether to expand the apple orchard. "We could use the extra income an orchard would bring," Rebecca was saying, "especially with beef prices what they are." "It's a long-term investment," Owen countered. "Takes years for apple trees to mature enough for a good crop." "All the more reason to plant them now," Rebecca insisted. "We're not going anywhere, are we?" The siblings' easy banter spoke of a deep bond, a partnership forged through shared hardship and mutual respect. Fiona felt a pang of envy for their certainty, their clear vision of a shared future. "What do you think, Miss Porter?" Owen asked suddenly, including her in the discussion. "Is an apple orchard worth the wait?" Surprised to be consulted, Fiona considered the question seriously. "My grandfather always said that anyone who plants trees believes in tomorrow," she offered. "I think there's something beautiful about investing in a future you may not see the full fruits of." Owen studied her with those whiskey-colored eyes that seemed to see more than she intended to reveal. "That's a wise perspective," he said finally. "Your grandfather sounds like a thoughtful man." "He was," Fiona agreed. "He homesteaded our land before Wyoming was even a territory. Built everything from nothing, much like you've done here." "Different times," Owen said modestly. "The country was younger then." "The frontier's always moving," Rebecca observed. "But there's still plenty of opportunity for those willing to work for it." After the meal, Owen returned to his outdoor tasks, while Rebecca insisted that Fiona rest her feet. The afternoon passed quietly, with Fiona helping to shell peas while seated comfortably in the cabin's main room. The domestic tranquility was a balm to her wounded spirit, even as she knew it was temporary. As evening approached, Fiona found herself on the porch again, watching the sunset paint the Wyoming sky in spectacular hues of orange and pink. Owen approached from the barn, his day's work apparently complete. "Mind some company?" he asked, gesturing to the empty chair beside her. "Please," she said, welcoming his presence. Owen settled his tall frame into the chair with a slight groan of tired muscles. For a while they sat in companionable silence, watching the light change over the rolling landscape. "Beautiful country," Fiona observed finally. "It is," Owen agreed. "Takes a special kind of person to see it, though. Some just see emptiness where I see possibility." "Is that why you stayed after the war? For the possibility?" Owen considered the question, his profile strong against the sunset light. "Partly. Also had nowhere else to go. And I'd seen enough of death and destruction to last several lifetimes." He turned to look at her directly. Wanted to build something instead of tearing down. The simple honesty of his words moved her. "You've built something wonderful here." "It's a start," he acknowledged. "Still a work in progress." He paused, then asked carefully, "Have you given any thought to what comes next for you?" The question she'd been avoiding all day. Fiona sighed. "I suppose I'll go home tomorrow, face whatever waits there." "And what do you want to happen after that?" Fiona blinked, surprised by the directness of the question. "I don't know," she admitted. "Everything I planned is gone." "Not everything," Owen said quietly. "Just the parts that involved Harrison Wells." The distinction was meaningful, though Fiona hadn't considered it that way. "I suppose you're right." "If you don't mind my asking," Owen ventured, "what were your plans? Before?" "We were to live in town," Fiona said, the words coming more easily than she'd expected. "Harrison was going to work in his father's freight business. We had a small house already purchased on Maple Street." She smiled ruefully. "I'd even sewn curtains." "And was that what you wanted? Town life?" The question caught her off guard. "I never really considered alternatives," she admitted. "It seemed the natural progression of things." Owen nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes the path we're expected to take isn't the one that would make us happiest." "Are you happy here?" Fiona asked impulsively. "With your life?" "Most days," Owen replied honestly. "It's hard work, and sometimes lonely. But there's satisfaction in building something with your own hands, in watching things grow because of your care." He looked out over his land, his expression reflective. "After the war, I never thought I'd find peace again. But this place, it heals something in me." The raw honesty of his words created an intimacy between them that Fiona found both unsettling and comforting. This man, whom she'd known for barely a day, had shared more of his true self than Harrison had in years of courtship. "Thank you," she said suddenly. Owen looked at her quizzically. "For what?" "For finding me yesterday. For bringing me here. For—" She struggled to articulate the depth of her gratitude. "For showing me kindness when I needed it most." "Anyone would have done the same," he said, though they both knew that wasn't true. The last light faded from the sky, stars beginning to appear in the vast Wyoming darkness. Inside the cabin, a lamp glowed as Rebecca moved about preparing the evening meal. "We should go in," Owen said finally, rising from his chair. He offered Fiona his hand. "Tomorrow will be soon enough to make decisions." Fiona placed her hand in his, allowing him to help her to her feet. His palm was warm and calloused against her skin, his grip gentle but secure. For the briefest moment, she felt a connection that transcended their short acquaintance, as though some part of her recognized something in him that she'd been searching for, without knowing it. The sensation was so unexpected that she quickly withdrew her hand, murmuring thanks as she preceded him into the cabin, her mind troubled by possibilities she wasn't ready to contemplate. That night, lying in the borrowed bed, Fiona listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch settling for the night, the distant lowing of cattle, the soft whicker of horses in the barn, the whisper of wind through cottonwood leaves. So different from town sounds, yet somehow more soothing. As sleep claimed her, her last conscious thought was that for the first time since Harrison's rejection, she had gone hours without thinking of him at all. Morning came with a clarity that seemed to extend beyond the crisp blue Wyoming sky to Fiona's own mind. She woke feeling more rested than she had in weeks, the crushing weight of yesterday's humiliation having ebbed to a dull ache rather than an all-consuming agony. Her feet, when she tested them, were still tender but much improved. Rebecca's careful ministrations and Owen's salve had worked small miracles overnight. Fiona dressed in the borrowed clothes, washed her face in cool water, and stepped into the main room to find Rebecca already busy at the stove. "Good morning," Fiona greeted her, moving to help set the table without being asked. Rebecca smiled. "You look better today. More color in your cheeks." "I feel better," Fiona admitted, "though I'm not sure I deserve to, so soon after." "Nonsense," Rebecca said firmly, placing a skillet of scrambled eggs on the table. "Healing isn't something you earn, it's something you accept when it comes." She poured coffee into 3 mugs. Owen's already seen to the morning chores. He should be in shortly. As if summoned by his name, Owen entered, bringing with him the scent of hay and horses. He paused when he saw Fiona, his eyes taking in her improved appearance. "Morning," he said, his voice carrying a warmth that seemed meant for her alone. "You look rested." "I am," she replied. "Thanks to both of you." They ate breakfast together, the conversation flowing naturally. Fiona found herself laughing at Owen's dry account of a particularly stubborn calf's antics, the sound of her own laughter surprising her. "I should return home today," she said when the meal was finished, though the words came reluctantly. "My parents will be worried, despite the note." Owen nodded, his expression unreadable. "I'll drive you in the wagon. Easier on your feet that way." "Are you sure?" "I don't want to take you from your work." "It's no trouble," he assured her. "I need supplies from town anyway." Rebecca began clearing the dishes. "I've packed your wedding dress. It needs proper cleaning, but I've brushed it as best I could." "Thank you." Fiona swallowed against the lump in her throat. "For everything." "You're welcome here any time," Rebecca said, squeezing Fiona's hand. "Remember that." An hour later, Fiona found herself seated beside Owen on the wagon bench, heading toward Sweetwater. The morning was glorious, with wildflowers dotting the prairie and meadowlarks singing from fence posts along the way. "Beautiful day," Owen commented, his eyes on the road ahead. "Yes," Fiona agreed, though her apprehension grew with each mile closer to town. "Owen? What exactly happened when you saw Harrison yesterday?" Owen's hands tightened slightly on the reins. "Nothing of consequence." "Please," Fiona pressed. "I'd like to know." Owen sighed, relenting. "I saw him at the mercantile, as I said. He recognized me. We've done business before and asked what brought me to town. I mentioned delivering a note for you." He paused. "He had the audacity to ask if you were making a scene over what happened." Fiona's cheeks burned with fresh humiliation. "And what did you say?" "I suggested that a man who abandons his bride at the altar has no right to question her response," Owen said carefully, "and that a real man honors his commitments, regardless of temptation." Was there an argument?" "Not exactly." Owen's jaw tightened. "I simply made it clear that in my opinion, his behavior reflected poorly on his character, and that you deserved far better." The simple defense warmed something in Fiona's chest. "Thank you for standing up for me." Owen glanced at her, his expression serious. "You don't need anyone to stand up for you, Fiona. You've got plenty of strength of your own. But sometimes it helps to know someone's in your corner." The use of her first name, so natural in that moment, created an intimacy that should have felt presumptuous, but somehow didn't. "Yes," she agreed softly. "It does help." They rode in companionable silence for a while, the rhythmic clop of the horses' hooves and creak of wagon wheels the only sounds. As they approached the outskirts of Sweetwater, Fiona's anxiety returned full force. "I'm afraid," she admitted suddenly, "of the gossip, the pity, facing everyone after running away like I did." "Understandable," Owen said, "but remember you did nothing wrong. Hold your head high." "Easy to say," Fiona murmured. "I know." Owen's voice was gentle. "But you're stronger than you realize, Fiona Porter." They entered town, the wagon drawing curious glances from passers-by. Fiona kept her eyes fixed straight ahead, refusing to acknowledge the whispers that followed their progress down Main Street. "Where to?" Owen asked quietly. "My parents' house," Fiona directed. "On Pine Street. Just past the church." The same church where she'd been abandoned 2 days ago. As they passed the building, Fiona forced herself to look at it, to face the sight of her humiliation directly. The white clapboard structure seemed smaller somehow, less imposing than it had in her memory. "You all right?" Owen asked, noting her gaze. "Yes," Fiona said, surprising herself with the truth of it. "I think I am." They turned onto Pine Street, and Fiona's childhood home came into view, a tidy 2-story house with a wide front porch, and her mother's roses climbing trellises on either side. The sight of it brought both comfort and trepidation. Owen drew the wagon to a halt at the gate. Before he could descend to help her down, the front door flew open and Fiona's mother rushed out, her father close behind. "Fiona!" Margaret Porter cried, hurrying down the path. "Oh, my dear girl!" Fiona slid from the wagon into her mother's waiting arms, the familiar scent of lavender water and baking flour enveloping her. Her father approached more slowly, his weathered face lined with concern. "You gave us quite a scare, daughter," Jacob Porter said gruffly, though his eyes were soft with relief. "I'm sorry," Fiona said, embracing him. "I wasn't thinking clearly." "Understandable, under the circumstances," her father replied, then turned his attention to Owen, who had dismounted and was standing respectfully nearby. "Mr. Young, we're indebted to you for looking after our daughter." Owen shook Jacob's outstretched hand. "No debt, sir. Anyone would have done the same." "Not anyone," Margaret disagreed, finally releasing Fiona to address Owen. "Please, won't you come inside? I've just made fresh coffee." Owen hesitated, glancing at Fiona. "I don't want to intrude on your family reunion." "Nonsense," Jacob said firmly. "The least we can do is offer you some hospitality after your kindness to our daughter." Fiona found herself hoping Owen would accept. The thought of facing her parents' questions alone was daunting, and Owen's steady presence had become a comfort she wasn't ready to relinquish. "Please," she added her own invitation. "Just for a little while." Something in her voice must have conveyed her need, for Owen nodded. "Thank you. I'd be honored." They entered the house, Owen removing his hat respectfully as he crossed the threshold. The familiar parlor, with its comfortable furnishings and family photographs, welcomed Fiona back into the life she'd fled. Margaret bustled to prepare coffee and sweet rolls, while Jacob settled Owen in the best armchair. Fiona took her usual place on the small sofa, her mother joining her there moments later. "Your feet," Margaret noticed with concern, seeing Fiona's careful movements. "What happened?" Briefly, Fiona recounted her impulsive flight from the church and how Owen had found her on the road. She downplayed the severity of her injuries, not wanting to worry her mother further, but Owen gently corrected the record. She walked several miles barefoot over rough country, he told them. My sister Rebecca bandaged them, but they'll need continued care for a few days. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. Oh, my poor girl, what you've been through. I'm all right, Mother, Fiona assured her, though the concern in her parents' faces threatened to undo her hard-won composure. Really? Jacob cleared his throat. Wells came by yesterday, he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. Tried to apologize, if you can believe it. Fiona's stomach clenched. What did he say? Nothing worth repeating, her father replied dismissively. I made it clear he wasn't welcome here anymore. Your father nearly threw him bodily from the porch, Margaret added with a hint of satisfaction. Despite everything, Fiona felt a smile tug at her lips. Her father, though not a large man, was fiercely protective of his family. What will you do now, Fiona? Her mother asked gently. You know you're welcome to stay here as long as you need. The question echoed Owen's from the previous evening, but now Fiona found she had at least the beginning of an answer. I think, she said slowly, that I need some time to figure out what I want. Not just what's expected of me. She glanced at Owen, finding encouragement in his steady gaze. Harrison's betrayal was devastating, but perhaps also an opportunity to reconsider the path I was on. Her parents exchanged surprised looks. Fiona had always been the dutiful daughter, following conventions without question. This new perspective was unexpected. Whatever you decide, her father said carefully, we support you. The conversation turned to practical matters, the house on Maple Street that had been purchased for the newlyweds. Jacob had already begun proceedings to reclaim Fiona's investment. The returned wedding gifts. Margaret had handled this difficult task with characteristic efficiency. And the community's response, surprisingly supportive of Fiona, with several prominent citizens openly snubbing Harrison. Throughout the discussion, Owen remained respectfully quiet, speaking only when directly addressed, but Fiona was acutely aware of his presence, drawing strength from it as she navigated the painful aftermath of her broken engagement. Finally, Owen rose to take his leave. I should get those supplies and head back to the ranch, he said. Rebecca will be wondering what's keeping me. Jacob shook his hand warmly. You're welcome here any time, Young. We won't forget what you did for our daughter. It was nothing, sir, Owen insisted. Margaret embraced him impulsively. It was everything to us. Fiona walked Owen to the door, stepping out onto the porch with him, while her parents tactfully remained inside. Thank you, she said quietly, for everything. Owen settled his hat on his head, his eyes meeting hers. Will you be all right? Yes, she said, with more confidence than she felt. Eventually? He nodded, seeming to understand all she wasn't saying. My offer stands if you need anything. The ranch is there. Rebecca would love the company. Just Rebecca? Fiona wondered, but didn't voice the thought. Thank you. Owen hesitated, as though wanting to say more, then simply nodded again and descended the porch steps. Fiona watched him walk to the wagon, his tall figure straight and sure against the morning light. Only after he'd driven away did she realize she hadn't asked when she might see him again. The days that followed settled into a pattern of quiet recovery. Fiona remained at her parents' home, her feet healing gradually under her mother's attentive care. Friends called to express sympathy and support, carefully avoiding mention of Harrison Wells unless Fiona herself brought up the subject. The town's reaction to the scandal had been largely as Owen reported public opinion favored Fiona, with many expressing outrage at Harrison's callousness. The Holloway family, embarrassed by their complicity in the affair, kept a low profile, and Harrison himself was seldom seen in public. Fiona avoided town at first, not ready to face curious stares or well-meaning expressions of pity. Instead, She spent her days helping her mother with household tasks, reading books long neglected during her engagement preparations, and most significantly, thinking about her future. "What about teaching again?" her father suggested one evening over dinner. "The school board always spoke highly of your work." Before her engagement, Fiona had taught at the Sweetwater School for 2 years. She had enjoyed the work but had resigned her position to prepare for married life, as was expected of women in her position. "Perhaps," she said thoughtfully, "though positions won't be available until the fall term." "There's no rush," her mother assured her. "You have time to consider all your options." Options. The word itself felt like a gift. For so long, Fiona had seen her future as a straight line leading to marriage with Harrison, children, a predictable life in Sweetwater. Now that line had vanished, leaving blank space that was both terrifying and exhilarating. A week after her return home, Fiona finally ventured into town, accompanying her mother to purchase fabric for summer dresses. The expedition proved less difficult than she'd feared. Though people certainly noticed her presence, most offered simple greetings or warm smiles rather than intrusive questions. At the general store, Mr. Tillman, the proprietor, greeted her with particular kindness. "Miss Porter, wonderful to see you out and about." "Thank you, Mr. Tillman," Fiona replied, managing a small smile. As her mother examined bolts of muslin, the shopkeeper leaned across the counter. "Young Owen was in yesterday," he mentioned casually. "Bought more fencing supplies. Said they're expanding the apple orchard after all." The mention of Owen sent an unexpected warmth through Fiona's chest. "Is that so?" "Fine man, Owen Young," Tillman continued, measuring out yards of fabric for another customer. "Built that ranch from nothing after the war. Lot of folks didn't think he'd make it, but he proved them wrong." He glanced at Fiona. "Asked after you, he did." "Did he?" Fiona tried to keep her voice neutral, though her heart had quickened. Wanted to know how you were faring." Tillman folded the measured fabric with practiced motions. "Told him you seemed to be healing up nicely from what I'd heard." Fiona nodded, unsure how to respond. She had thought of Owen often since their parting, wondering how he was, if he ever thought of her. The confirmation that she had been in his thoughts as well stirred emotions she wasn't prepared to examine too closely. That evening, as she helped her mother prepare dinner, Fiona found herself remembering the domestic tranquility of the young ranch Rebecca at the stove, Owen coming in from his day's work, the simple harmony of their shared life. "Mother," she said suddenly, "have you ever wondered what your life might have been like if you'd made different choices?" Margaret looked up from the vegetables she was chopping. "What an unusual question. What brings this to mind?" Fiona shrugged, struggling to articulate her thoughts. I always assumed I'd follow a certain path. Marriage, children, a life not so different from yours. But now I'm wondering if that's really what I want. Or just what I thought I was supposed to want." Her mother set down her knife, giving Fiona her full attention. "I married your father because I loved him, not because it was expected. Though I'll admit, in those days, options for women were even more limited than they are now." She smiled slightly. "What are you really asking, Fiona?" "I'm not sure," Fiona admitted. "I just keep thinking about different ways of living, different kinds of partnerships." Margaret's eyes were knowing. "Would these thoughts have anything to do with a certain rancher who rescued you on the road?" Heat rose in Fiona's cheeks. "I barely know him." "But you're thinking about him," her mother observed gently. "There's no shame in that, dear. Sometimes the heart recognizes what the mind hasn't yet accepted." Fiona busied herself with setting the table, avoiding her mother's perceptive gaze. "It's too soon," she said finally. "After Harrison, I need to be careful, to be sure of my own mind before I consider anyone else." "Wise," Margaret agreed. "But don't let fear keep you from possibilities, Fiona. Not all men are like Harrison Wells." The conversation stayed with Fiona long after dinner was finished, and the house had grown quiet for the night. Lying in her childhood bed, staring at the familiar patterns of moonlight on the ceiling, she allowed herself to fully consider what had been hovering at the edges of her consciousness since that day on the road. She was attracted to Owen Young, not just grateful to him, not just admiring of his kindness and integrity, but genuinely drawn to him as a man. The realization was both frightening and strangely liberating. But her mother was right, it was too soon after Harrison's betrayal to trust her own heart. She needed time, perspective. And yet, the thought of never seeing Owen again left an ache in her chest that she couldn't dismiss as mere gratitude. 2 days later, as Fiona was helping her father in his small study, organizing papers from his surveying business, a knock came at the front door. She heard her mother answer it, then call her name. "Fiona, you have a visitor." Curious, Fiona made her way to the parlor, stopping short in the doorway when she saw Rebecca Young rising from the sofa. "Rebecca!" Fiona exclaimed, genuine pleasure in her voice. "What a lovely surprise!" Rebecca smiled warmly. "I hope I'm not intruding. I was in town delivering eggs to the hotel and thought I'd stop by to see how you're recovering." "Not intruding at all," Fiona assured her, taking a seat beside her visitor. "My feet are almost completely healed, thanks to your excellent care." They chatted easily for a few minutes, with Margaret bringing tea and fresh-baked cookies before excusing herself to give the young women privacy. "How are things at the ranch?" Fiona asked, pouring tea for them both. "Busy," Rebecca replied. "Spring is always our most hectic time. Owen's been working from dawn to dusk getting the new orchard section fenced and planted." She accepted the teacup with thanks. "He says your father might be interested in surveying some additional acreage we're considering purchasing." "He mentioned that last night," Fiona confirmed. "Said he'd ride out next week to take a look." Rebecca stirred her tea thoughtfully. "You should come with him," she suggested, her tone casual but her eyes watchful. "I'd love to show you the new apple saplings. And the strawberry preserves turned out beautifully. I've brought you a jar." The invitation hung in the air, its implications extending beyond a simple social call. Fiona knew that accepting meant seeing Owen again, testing the confusing feelings that had developed during their brief acquaintance. "I'd like that," she said finally, making her decision. "If father doesn't mind the company." Rebecca's smile widened. "Wonderful. Owen will be pleased." At Fiona's questioning look, she added, "He's been asking about you, you know." Pretending it's just casual interest, but I know my brother. Fiona felt a flutter of anticipation in her stomach. "Has he?" "He's not a man who forms attachments easily, Fiona. The war left its scars. Not all of them visible." Rebecca set down her teacup. "But he's a good man. The best I know." "I believe that," Fiona said softly. The conversation shifted to other topics: Rebecca's plans for a small greenhouse, the latest town gossip, a humorous account of a particularly determined raccoon that had been raiding their chicken coop. By the time Rebecca took her leave, promising to expect Fiona with her father the following week, a sense of anticipation had replaced the aimless melancholy that had colored Fiona's days since her return home. That night at dinner, when Fiona mentioned her intention to accompany her father to the Young ranch, her parents exchanged a meaningful glance that she pretended not to notice. "Sounds like a fine idea," Jacob said mildly. "Fresh air will do you good." "And Rebecca seems like a lovely young woman," Margaret added. "It would be nice for you to have a friend outside of town for a while." Neither mentioned Owen directly, but Fiona knew they understood her true motivation. Their tactful acceptance warmed her heart and strengthened her resolve to at least explore the connection she'd felt with the quiet rancher. The day of the visit dawned clear and perfect, with a sky so intensely blue it almost hurt to look at it. Fiona dressed with more care than she'd taken since her return home, selecting a yellow calico dress that her mother said brought out the gold flecks in her hazel eyes. She braided her hair and pinned it in a coronet around her head, a style that was practical for the outdoors, but more becoming than her usual simple arrangement. "You look lovely," her father commented as they set out in his buggy, surveying equipment packed securely in the back. "Thank you," Fiona replied, not bothering to pretend the compliment meant nothing. "It feels good to take care about my appearance again." Jacob nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Healing takes many forms, daughter." The journey to the young ranch seemed both longer and shorter than Fiona remembered. Each familiar landmark brought a stronger sense of anticipation, until finally the neat log house came into view, smoke rising from the chimney against the backdrop of rolling hills. Rebecca emerged onto the porch as they approached, waving a welcome. But it was the tall figure beside her that captured Fiona's attention. Owen stood with his thumbs hooked in his belt, his stance relaxed but his eyes intent as they followed the buggy's approach. As Jacob drew the horse to a halt, Owen stepped forward to help Fiona down. His hands at her waist were strong and sure, just as she remembered, but this time a current of awareness passed between them as their eyes met. "Miss Porter," he greeted her, his voice deeper than she recalled. "It's good to see you." "Mr. Young," she returned, finding herself suddenly shy. "Thank you for having us." "Always welcome here," he said, the simple phrase carrying more meaning than its words alone. Rebecca bustled forward, breaking the moment with cheerful practicality. "Come inside for coffee before you men start your surveying. I've made cinnamon rolls." The morning unfolded pleasantly. While Jacob and Owen discussed the potential land purchase over maps spread on the kitchen table, Rebecca showed Fiona the results of their strawberry preserving efforts and the plans for her greenhouse. "Owen's bringing back glass from Cheyenne next month," Rebecca explained as they walked the proposed site. "It won't be large, but enough to start seedlings early and maybe grow some herbs through winter." "It's a wonderful idea," Fiona said sincerely. "My mother always wished for such a luxury." As they returned to the house, they saw Owen and Jacob heading toward the eastern pasture, surveying equipment in hand. "They'll be hours," Rebecca predicted. "Would you like to see the new orchard? It's not far." Fiona readily agreed, and soon they were walking along a newly fenced section where dozens of slender saplings stood in neat rows, their young leaves bright against the rich soil. "Owen worked so hard on this," Rebecca said, pride evident in her voice. "Said he was convinced by something you said about planting for the future." The thought that her words had influenced such a significant decision warmed Fiona deeply. "They're beautiful," she said, touching one delicate trunk gently. "What varieties did you choose?" "Mostly winesap and northern spy, they winter well here. But Owen insisted on some yellow transparents too, said they remind him of sunshine." The conversation flowed easily as they explored the orchard and surrounding pastures. Rebecca spoke openly about their lives, filling in the gaps in Fiona's knowledge of Owen's past, his distinguished but difficult service during the war, his struggles to establish the ranch in those early years, his unwavering support of Rebecca through her grief over her lost fiancé. "He never complained," Rebecca said as they rested on a fallen log, the ranch buildings visible in the distance. "Not once, even when we were down to our last dollars and the first winter nearly broke us. Just kept working, kept believing we could make something here." "He's remarkable," Fiona said softly. Rebecca studied her thoughtfully. "He likes you, you know. More than likes you, I suspect." Fiona felt heat rise in her cheeks. "We barely know each other." "Sometimes that doesn't matter," Rebecca replied. "Sometimes you just recognize something in another person that fits with something in yourself." She smiled wistfully. "That's how it was with Thomas and me. Knew each other our whole lives. But one day I just saw him differently. Like he'd been waiting there all along for me to really see him." The words resonated with Fiona's own confused feelings. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "After Harrison, I'm not sure I trust my own judgment anymore." "Understandable," Rebecca said kindly. "But Harrison showed you who he was when he abandoned you. Owen showed you who he was when he found you on that road." She stood, brushing dust from her skirt. "Just something to consider." They returned to the house to find Owen already there, stoking the fire while a pot of stew simmered on the stove. "Your father's still taking measurements," he told Fiona. "Said he'd be another hour or so." "I need to check on the new calf," Rebecca announced with transparent deliberateness. "Won't be long." And then Fiona found herself alone with Owen for the first time since that evening on his porch. An awkward silence fell between them, charged with unspoken thoughts. "How are your feet?" Owen asked finally, gesturing for her to take a seat at the table. Fiona sat, smoothing her skirt nervously. "Fully healed, thank you. Your sister is an excellent nurse." "That she is," Owen agreed. He remained standing, his tall frame seeming too large for the domestic setting. "And you're, well, otherwise?" "Getting there," Fiona said honestly. "Each day is a little easier than the last." Owen nodded, his expression serious. "I'm glad to hear it." Another silence fell, more comfortable this time. Owen moved to the stove, stirring the stew with practiced motions. "Rebecca says you're expanding the apple orchard," Fiona ventured. "She mentioned my comment about planting for the future may have influenced your decision." A smile touched Owen's lips. "It did. Made me realize I've been thinking too much about immediate returns instead of long-term benefits." He replaced the lid on the pot. "Your perspective was refreshing." "I'm flattered my words carried such weight," Fiona said, meaning it. Owen turned to face her fully, his expression open and direct. "Your words carry weight with me, Fiona." The simple statement, spoken without artifice, stirred something deep within her. Here was a man who said exactly what he meant, without manipulation or calculation. "Owen," she began, not entirely sure what she meant to say. The front door opened, Rebecca returning from her brief errand. The moment passed, but something had shifted between them, an acknowledgement, however subtle, of the connection they both felt. The remainder of the visit passed pleasantly, with Jacob returning to share a meal before they needed to start back to town. Throughout the afternoon, Fiona was acutely aware of Owen's presence, his quiet attentiveness, the way his eyes sought hers across the table, the respectful distance he maintained while still making his interest clear. As they prepared to leave, Owen helped Fiona into the buggy, his hands lingering slightly longer than necessary at her waist. "Will you come again?" he asked quietly, his eyes holding hers. "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "I'd like that." He nodded, satisfied. "Good, that's good." Rebecca embraced Fiona warmly. "Don't be a stranger," she urged. "The ranch is at its prettiest in early summer." As Jacob turned the buggy toward town, Fiona looked back to see Owen still standing in the yard, watching them go. She raised her hand in farewell, and he returned the gesture, a solitary figure against the backdrop of the home he'd built from nothing. "Nice folks," Jacob commented as they rode. "Young's a hard-working man, knows what he wants and goes after it." "Yes," Fiona agreed, thinking of the steady way Owen had looked at her. "I believe he does." Over the following weeks, Fiona found herself drawn back to the Young ranch with increasing frequency. Sometimes she accompanied her father on business. Other times she visited Rebecca on her own, learning about ranch life and helping with whatever tasks were at hand. Each visit deepened her connection not just with Owen, but with the land itself, the rhythm of ranch life, the satisfaction of physical work, the beauty of the Wyoming wilderness. She found herself looking forward to these visits with an eagerness that both excited and frightened her. Owen never pushed, never presumed, but his interest was unmistakable. It showed in the way he made time to join them whenever she visited, in the thoughtful questions he asked about her day, in the projects he happened to be working on nearby when she and Rebecca were in the garden or kitchen. On a warm June afternoon, nearly a month after her first visit, Fiona arrived at the ranch to find Rebecca unexpectedly absent, called to a neighbor's homestead to help with a difficult childbirth. She left a note, Owen explained, looking somewhat uncomfortable as he stood on the porch. Said she'd be back by evening and that you should stay if you'd like. Or I can drive you back to town, if you prefer. Fiona hesitated only briefly. I'd like to stay, if that's all right. I brought some books for Rebecca, I can leave them for her. Relief and pleasure crossed Owen's features. Of course it's all right. I was just about to ride out to check the north pasture fence. You're welcome to join me, if you'd like to see more of the ranch. The invitation was casual, but they both recognized its significance time alone together, away from the watchful eyes of family and friends. I'd enjoy that, Fiona said, her heart beating a little faster. Owen saddled 2 horses, his own chestnut gelding, Thunder, and a gentle mare named Daisy that Rebecca sometimes rode. He helped Fiona mount, his hand strong and steady at her waist, then swung easily into his own saddle. They rode side by side across the rolling grassland, Owen pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of the ranch's early days. Fiona found herself relaxing in his company, laughing at his dry humor, sharing her own thoughts more freely than she had with anyone in a long time. What made you decide to homestead here? She asked as they paused to let the horses drink from a clear stream. After the war, you could have gone anywhere. Owen dismounted, helping Fiona down before answering. Wanted open space, he said simply. After 4 years of battlefields and trenches and too many men crowded together, I needed sky and distance. He gazed across the rolling landscape. First time I saw this valley, something just clicked. Felt right in a way nothing had since before the war. Fiona nodded, understanding completely. It is beautiful. They walked a short distance, leading the horses until they reached a small rise overlooking the valley. Owen spread his jacket on the grass, gesturing for Fiona to sit. Best view on the property, he said, settling beside her at a respectful distance. For a while they sat in companionable silence, watching clouds cast shadows across the distant mountains. A hawk circled lazily overhead, riding thermal currents with effortless grace. May I ask you something personal? Owen said finally, his voice quiet. Of course. Are you still in love with him? Wells, I mean. The question caught Fiona off guard, but she found the answer came easily. No, she said with certainty. I'm not sure I ever truly was, now that I have perspective. I was in love with the idea of him, of marriage, of the life I thought we'd have. She plucked a stem of grass, twirling it between her fingers. I was more in love with the story than the man, if that makes sense. Owen nodded thoughtfully. It does. War taught me that how we can believe in ideas or symbols more than the reality. What about you? Fiona asked, gathering her courage. Have you ever been in love? A shadow crossed Owen's face. Once, he said after a moment. During the war. She was a nurse at a field hospital where I spent 3 weeks recovering from a bullet wound. His eyes grew distant with memory. Mary Sutton. Kind, brave woman. We wrote letters for a year after I rejoined my regiment. What happened? Fiona asked gently, sensing the story didn't end happily. Typhoid, Owen said simply, swept through the hospital where she worked. Got her letter from her sister telling me she was gone. I'm so sorry, Fiona said, instinctively reaching to touch his hand. Owen turned his palm up, capturing her fingers in a gentle hold. It was a long time ago, he said quietly, but it made me cautious about letting people get close. The simple confession, offered without self-pity, moved Fiona deeply. "Thank you for telling me." Owen's eyes met hers, direct and honest. "I find I want you to know me, Fiona. The real me. Not just the man I show to most of the world." The moment stretched between them, intimate and charged with possibility. Fiona was acutely aware of her hand in his, of the warmth of the sun on her face, of the steady beat of her heart. "I want to know you too," she said softly, the words both a confession and a promise. Owen's smile, rare and transformative, changed his entire face. Still holding her hand, he helped her to her feet. "We should head back," he said reluctantly, storm clouds building to the west. The ride back to the ranch was comfortable, the silence between them now filled with understanding rather than uncertainty. As they approached the house, rain began to fall gentle at first, then with increasing intensity. By the time they reached the barn, they were both soaked, laughing as they led the horses inside out of the downpour. Owen helped Fiona dismount, his hands lingering at her waist. Water dripped from her hair, running in rivulets down her face. "You're beautiful," Owen said suddenly, the words seeming to surprise him as much as her. "Even soaking wet." Before Fiona could respond, he stepped back, visibly collecting himself. "I'll get these horses settled. You go on to the house, there's dry clothes of Rebecca's in the chest in her room." Fiona nodded, oddly disappointed by his retreat, and dashed through the rain to the porch. Inside, she found Rebecca's room and changed into a borrowed dress, toweling her hair as best she could. When Owen entered some time later, he too had changed into dry clothes, clean trousers, and a blue cotton shirt that brought out the amber tones in his eyes. His hair, still damp, curled slightly at his temples. "Storm's settled in," he reported, moving to stoke the fire. "Looks like we're in for a wet afternoon." Fiona smiled, strangely content with this development. "I don't mind." They spent the next hours in quiet companionship, Owen repairing a bridle, while Fiona read aloud from one of the books she'd brought for Rebecca. The rain drummed steadily on the roof, creating a cozy intimacy within the cabin. As evening approached, Owen prepared a simple meal of salt pork, beans, and biscuits left over from breakfast. They ate at the kitchen table, the lamp casting a warm glow over their faces. "I should get you home," Owen said reluctantly as they finished. "Your parents will worry." "They know I'm here," Fiona assured him. "And the rain's still heavy." As if to emphasize her point, a flash of lightning illuminated the windows, followed seconds later by a rumble of thunder. Owen frowned. "Roads will be mud. Might be dangerous in the dark." "Then I'll stay until morning," Fiona said, the decision feeling right despite its impropriety. "Rebecca will be back soon, won't she?" Owen nodded, though uncertainty showed in his expression. "Should be, but if the weather's delayed her—" "Then I'll sleep in her room," Fiona said practically. "There's nothing improper in that." A smile quirked the corner of Owen's mouth. "No, I suppose not, though town gossips might see it differently." "Let them talk," Fiona said with sudden defiance. "I'm tired of living my life according to others' expectations." Owen studied her for a long moment, something like admiration in his gaze. "You've changed since that day on the road." "Have I?" Fiona considered the observation. "Perhaps I'm just becoming more myself." The evening deepened with no sign of Rebecca. Owen built up the fire against the storm's chill, and they settled in the main room, he in his customary chair, Fiona on the small sofa. "Tell me about your time as a teacher," Owen requested. "Rebecca mentioned you taught before your engagement." Fiona smiled, surprised by his interest. "I did, for 2 years. Mostly younger children reading, arithmetic, basic history, and geography." Her expression softened with fond memories. "I loved it, actually, seeing their faces light up when they grasped a new concept. There's nothing quite like it." "You miss it?" Owen observed. Yes, Fiona admitted. Though, at the time, giving it up for marriage seemed the natural progression. That's what women do, after all. Not all women, Owen countered. Rebecca never wanted that traditional path, and there are women doctors, lawyers even, in the bigger cities. True, but rare, Fiona said, and often ridiculed for their choices. Does that matter? Owen asked, his gaze intent. What others think? The question struck at the heart of Fiona's recent soul-searching. It used to, she said slowly. Very much. But now, I'm not so sure. Thunder crashed outside, closer now, making the windows rattle. The lamp flickered, throwing shadows across the walls. What do you want, Fiona? Owen asked, his voice low. Not what you're expected to want. Not what's proper or practical. What do you, yourself, truly want? The directness of the question took her breath away. No one had ever asked her that before, not her parents, certainly not Harrison. Perhaps she had never even asked herself. I want, she began, then paused, searching for honesty. I want work that matters. Teaching, perhaps, or something else useful. I want a home that's truly mine, not just a place where I exist as someone's wife or daughter. She took a deep breath. And I want love, real love, based on respect and understanding, not convenience or appearances. Owen nodded, his expression thoughtful. Those seem like worthy wants to me. What about you? Fiona asked, turning the question back to him. What do you want? Owen Young. He was quiet for so long that Fiona thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and certain. I want this land to thrive. I want to see those apple trees bear fruit, watch the herds grow strong. I want to build something that lasts beyond my time. He paused, his eyes finding hers in the lamplight. And I want a partner to share it with. Someone who sees the beauty in this life, who understands that wealth isn't just about money in the bank. The implication hung in the air between them, too significant to ignore, yet too new to acknowledge directly. Another crack of thunder. This one directly overhead made Fiona start. The lamp flickered again, then steadied. Storm's right on top of us, Owen observed, rising to check the windows. We should probably turn in before we lose the light completely. The practical suggestion broke the moment's intensity, for which Fiona was both relieved and disappointed. She stood, smoothing her borrowed dress. Of course, it's been a long day. Owen showed her to Rebecca's room, bringing extra blankets against the storm's chill. Sleep well, he said, his voice gentle. I'll be in the main room if you need anything. Thank you, Fiona said, suddenly shy. For today. For everything. Owen smiled, his eyes warm in the lamplight. Sweet dreams, Fiona Porter. Alone in Rebecca's simple room, Fiona changed into a borrowed nightgown and slipped between cool sheets. Outside, the storm continued its assault, but inside she felt oddly peaceful. Something had shifted between her and Owen today, words spoken and unspoken creating a new understanding. As she drifted toward sleep, Fiona realized with startling clarity that she was falling in love with Owen Young, not with an idea or a story, but with the real man, with his strength and gentleness, his honesty and integrity. The recognition should have frightened her after her experience with Harrison, but instead it felt right, as though her heart had found its true course at last. Morning dawned clear and fresh, the storm having cleansed the world overnight. Fiona woke to the scent of coffee and the sound of voices Rebecca had returned. Dressing quickly in her own clothes, which Owen had thoughtfully hung by the fire to dry, Fiona joined the siblings in the kitchen. Rebecca looked tired but pleased to see her. "What an adventure you had!" she exclaimed, embracing Fiona warmly. "Owen told me about the storm, I'm sorry I wasn't here? Mrs. Dawson's baby took her time arriving. Everything turned out well? Fiona asked, accepting the coffee Owen offered. A healthy girl, Rebecca confirmed. They're fourth, but the first to survive past infancy, poor souls. They ate breakfast together, the conversation easy and comfortable. Fiona found her eyes drawn repeatedly to Owen, remembering their conversation from the night before. Each time their gazes met, a current of understanding passed between them. After breakfast, Owen offered to drive Fiona home in the wagon. Rebecca hugged her goodbye with a knowing smile. "Come back soon," she whispered. "I think my brother might pine away if you don't." The journey to town passed too quickly. Owen spoke of practical matters, the repairs needed after the storm, his plans for improving the pasture irrigation, a new colt born the previous week. Fiona listened, asking questions, offering suggestions, imagining herself as part of this life he was building. As they approached her parents' house, Owen fell silent, his expression turning serious. "Fiona," he said finally as the house came into view, "I'd like to call on you, properly." The formal request, so traditional after the intimacy they'd already shared, made Fiona smile. "I'd like that very much." Owen's relief was visible. "Good. That's good." He guided the wagon to a halt before her gate. "Would Sunday afternoon be acceptable? I could speak with your father then as well." The propriety of the suggestion touched Fiona deeply. Despite the unconventional beginning of their relationship, Owen was determined to honor her with traditional respect. "Sunday would be perfect," she assured him. He helped her down from the wagon, his hands strong at her waist. For a moment they stood close, the morning sunshine warm around them. "Until Sunday, then," Owen said softly. "Until Sunday," Fiona echoed, reluctant to end their time together. Owen hesitated, then reached for her hand, raising it briefly to his lips in a gesture both old-fashioned and deeply romantic. "Take care, Fiona Porter." As she watched him drive away, Fiona felt a certainty settle in her heart. Whatever happened next, her life had changed irrevocably that day on the dusty road when a cowboy had lifted her onto his horse. Sunday arrived with agonizing slowness. Fiona spent the morning in a state of nervous anticipation, changing her dress twice before settling on a blue muslin that her mother assured her was most becoming. "You care for him," Margaret observed as she helped Fiona arrange her hair. "This young man." "Yes," Fiona admitted, seeing no reason to dissemble. "Very much." Margaret's eyes met her daughter's in the mirror. "And he cares for you." "I believe he does," Fiona said, her cheeks warming. Her mother's hands stilled on her hair. "Are you certain, Fiona?" "After Harrison." "Owen is nothing like Harrison," Fiona interrupted with quiet conviction. "Nothing at all." Margaret studied her daughter's face, then nodded, satisfied with what she saw there. "Good. Your father and I thought as much, but we needed to be sure you were sure." The arrival of Owen's wagon at precisely 2 o'clock sent Fiona's heart racing. He had dressed for the occasion in what were clearly his best clothes, dark trousers, a crisp white shirt, and a black coat that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. His hair was neatly combed, and he carried his hat respectfully in his hands as he approached the porch. Jacob met him at the door with careful cordiality. "Young, right on time." "Mr. Porter," Owen greeted him, shaking his hand. "Mrs. Porter." He nodded to Margaret, who had emerged from the kitchen. "Thank you for allowing me to call on your daughter." "Come in," Jacob invited, stepping aside. "Fiona will be down shortly." In fact, Fiona was already descending the stairs, her heart in her throat as Owen's eyes found hers. The warmth in his gaze steadied her, and she smiled as she joined them in the parlor. "Mr. Young," she greeted him formally, though her eyes conveyed a more personal welcome. "Miss Porter," he returned, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "You look lovely." The afternoon proceeded with proper decorum: tea in the parlor, conversation about weather and town affairs, careful inquiries from Jacob about Owen's ranch and prospects. Through it all, Fiona was acutely aware of Owen's presence, of the unspoken connection between them that seemed to grow stronger with each passing moment. "Perhaps you'd like to show Mr. Young the garden, Fiona," Margaret suggested after an appropriate interval. "The roses are particularly fine this year." The thin pretext for privacy was transparent, but Fiona seized it gratefully. "An excellent idea. Would you care to see them, Mr. Young?" "Very much," Owen agreed, rising to follow her outside. The garden was indeed beautiful, with Margaret's prized roses climbing trellises and beds of early summer flowers in full bloom. But neither Fiona nor Owen paid much attention to the horticultural display as they walked the gravel paths, finally stopping beside a small ornamental pond. "Your parents are good people," Owen said, his voice low. "I can see why you're so... you." Fiona smiled at the awkward compliment. "They are? They've been my strength these past weeks." Owen nodded, his expression turning serious. "Fiona, I need to say something, and I hope you won't think I'm being presumptuous or rushing matters." Her heart quickened. "Go on." Owen took a deep breath, his eyes meeting hers directly. "I know we haven't known each other long, and I know you're still healing from what Wells did to you, but I find myself thinking about you constantly. When you're at the ranch, everything seems brighter somehow, and when you leave, I count the hours until you might return." The honest declaration, delivered without artifice or calculation, moved Fiona deeply. "Owen," he held up a hand, gently interrupting. "Please, let me finish while I have the courage." He took another breath. "I'm falling in love with you, Fiona Porter. I don't expect you to return those feelings yet, or maybe ever. But I wanted you to know where I stand. I'm not a man who plays games or says things he doesn't mean." Fiona's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of overwhelming emotion. "I know that about you," she said softly. "It's one of the many things I admire." Owen's expression was a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "I'm not asking for any promises, just permission to keep calling on you, to see where this might lead." Fiona stepped closer, her decision made. "Owen Young, I would be honored by your continued attention." She smiled up at him, her heart full. "And I should tell you, your feelings are not unreturned." The joy that transformed Owen's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "Truly?" "Truly," Fiona confirmed. "I've never known anyone like you. Never felt this way before, not with Harrison, not with anyone." Owen reached for her hand, holding it between both of his. "I'll do right by you, Fiona. Whatever happens, whatever you decide you want from life, I'll support it. That's my promise to you." The sincerity in his voice, the steady warmth in his eyes, confirmed everything Fiona had come to believe about this man. Here was someone who saw her, really saw her, and valued what he saw. "I believe you," she said simply. For a long moment they stood there, hands joined, the garden blooming around them in silent witness to the promises exchanged. Then, with gentle reverence, Owen bent his head and brushed his lips against hers, their first kiss, sweet and brief and full of promise. When he drew back, Fiona saw her own wonder reflected in his eyes. "We should return to the house," she said reluctantly, "before my parents wonder what's keeping us." Owen nodded, though he seemed equally reluctant to end the moment. He offered her his arm, and she took it, feeling the solid strength of him beside her as they walked back toward the house. That evening, after Owen had taken his leave with a formal bow to her parents and a more lingering look for Fiona, Jacob called her into his study. "Sit down, daughter," he invited, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. I'd like to speak with you about Young. Fiona sat, smoothing her skirts nervously. Yes, father? Jacob studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. He's asked my permission to court you formally. Though she had expected as much after their conversation in the garden, Fiona's heart still leapt at the confirmation. I see. And what did you tell him? I told him I needed to speak with you first, Jacob replied. To be sure this is what you want. It is, Fiona said without hesitation. Very much. Jacob nodded, unsurprised. He's a good man, from everything I've seen and heard. Not wealthy, but solid, hardworking, honorable. Yes, Fiona agreed. Those qualities only scratching the surface of what she admired about Owen. Your mother and I just want to be certain you're not rushing into this as a way to heal from Wells's betrayal, Jacob said carefully. These feelings for Young, are they genuine, or are they gratitude for his kindness when you were at your lowest? The question was fair and one Fiona had asked herself repeatedly over the past weeks. They're genuine, she said with quiet certainty. What I feel for Owen is nothing like what I felt for Harrison. It's deeper, more real somehow. She met her father's gaze directly. I know my own mind in this, father. Jacob studied her face, then nodded, apparently satisfied with what he saw there. Then I'll tell him yes. He has our blessing. A rare smile softened his stern features. He's a fortunate man, to have won your heart. I'm the fortunate one, Fiona countered, rising to embrace her father. Thank you for understanding. The courtship that followed was both traditional and unique to their particular circumstances. Owen called at the Porter home each Sunday, taking Fiona for drives in his wagon or walks through town, always under the watchful but approving eyes of Sweetwater's citizens. During the week, Fiona often visited the ranch, sometimes with her father on business, sometimes on her own as her friendship with Rebecca deepened. These visits allowed her and Owen more relaxed time together, working side by side on ranch tasks or simply talking as the summer evenings lengthened. Through it all, Owen was patient and considerate, never pushing for more than Fiona was ready to give, always respectful of her need to heal completely from Harrison's betrayal before committing her heart fully again. July brought scorching heat and the town's annual Independence Day celebration. Fiona attended on Owen's arm, ignoring the curious glances and whispered comments their obvious attachment generated. Harrison was conspicuously absent, having reportedly taken a business trip to Denver, a convenient escape from the town's collective disapproval. As they watched the modest fireworks display from a blanket spread on the grass near the town square, Owen's arm around her shoulders, Fiona felt a contentment she had never experienced with Harrison. There was no anxiety about meeting expectations, no worry about appearances, just the simple joy of being with someone who accepted her exactly as she was. Penny for your thoughts, Owen murmured as red and blue sparks illuminated the night sky. Fiona smiled, leaning into his embrace. I was just thinking how different this is from what I imagined my life would be. Better or worse? Owen asked, his voice carrying a hint of uncertainty. Fiona turned to face him, the colored lights playing across his features. Better, she said with conviction. So much better. The relief in his smile warmed her heart. He reached up to touch her cheek gently. You've become essential to me, Fiona Porter. And you to me, she admitted, no longer afraid of the vulnerability that came with such honesty. Around them, townspeople oohed and awed at the fireworks, but Fiona and Owen were lost in their own private moment, the connection between them deepening with each shared confidence, each tender glance. August brought the first harvest from Rebecca's kitchen garden and preparations for the fall cattle drive. Fiona found herself increasingly involved in ranch operations, her practical nature and quick mind proving valuable as Owen considered improvements to their irrigation system and plans for expanding the apple orchard further. You have a good head for business, Owen remarked one evening as they reviewed the ranch's account books together at the kitchen table. Better than mine, if I'm honest. Fiona looked up from the column of figures she was calculating. Don't sell yourself short. You've built all this from nothing. Through stubborn persistence more than financial acumen, Owen admitted with a self-deprecating smile. Numbers have never been my strong suit. Well, they're one of mine, Fiona said, making a final notation. And according to these figures, the ranch showed a 15% increase in profits over last year, despite the drought. Owen's eyebrows rose in surprise. That much? Are you certain? I've checked the calculations twice, Fiona confirmed, showing him the neat columns in her precise handwriting. Owen studied the figures, then looked at Fiona with new appreciation. You know, with your help, we could expand more quickly than I'd planned. Maybe add that section of grazing land to the north after all. The casual "we" did not escape Fiona's notice, nor did the implication that Owen saw her as a potential partner in more than just romantic terms. The thought both thrilled and humbled her that this man valued not just her companionship, but her mind, her abilities, her contribution to the future he was building. As August gave way to September, subtle changes marked the deepening of their relationship. Owen's formal Miss Porter gave way to Fiona in all circumstances, not just private ones. Their goodbye embraces lingered longer. Their conversations delved deeper into hopes and fears, dreams and disappointments. One crisp September evening, as they walked among the young apple trees after a day of preserving the garden's bounty with Rebecca, Owen stopped suddenly, turning to face Fiona with an expression of such tender seriousness that her heart quickened. I've been thinking, he began, taking both her hands in his. A dangerous pastime, Fiona teased gently, though her pulse raced at his tone. Owen smiled briefly, then grew serious again. Fiona, these past months have been the happiest of my life. Having you here, seeing you with Rebecca, watching you become part of this place. He gestured toward the ranch buildings visible in the distance. It feels right in a way nothing ever has before. It feels right to me, too, Fiona admitted softly. Owen took a deep breath. I know it hasn't been that long since what happened with Wells. And I promised myself I'd give you all the time you needed to be sure of your own heart. His eyes held hers, warm and steady. But I find I can't wait any longer to ask you a question I've been holding back for weeks now. Understanding dawned, bringing with it a surge of emotion so powerful that Fiona felt momentarily breathless. Owen. With the simple dignity that characterized everything he did, Owen Young knelt before her on the soft earth between the apple saplings they had tended together. Still holding her hands, he looked up at her with eyes that held no doubt, no reservation, only love and certainty. Fiona Porter, I love you. I think I've loved you since I found you walking barefoot on that road, so broken, yet still so strong. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? Of building a life with me here, among these trees that will grow old as we grow old together? Tears filled Fiona's eyes, not of sorrow, but of overwhelming joy. In this moment, all the pain of Harrison's rejection, all the humiliation and heartbreak, seemed not just healed, but transformed stepping stones that had led her to this man, this place, this love that felt as solid and true as the earth beneath their feet. Yes, she said, her voice clear despite her tears. Yes, Owen Young, I will marry you. I will build a life with you. I will love you for all my days. Owen rose to his feet in one fluid motion, gathering her into his arms with reverent joy. His kiss was tender at first, then deepening as she responded, their shared love finding expression in this most ancient of promises. When they finally drew apart, Owen reached into his pocket and withdrew a small leather pouch. "I have something for you," he said, a touch of nervousness in his voice. "It's not fancy, but it was my mother's." From the pouch he produced a ring, a simple gold band set with a small, perfect pearl. She said the pearl represented how precious love is, and how it grows more beautiful with time and care. As Owen slipped the ring onto her finger, Fiona felt the rightness of it, this heirloom token, this connection to the family she would join, this symbol of a love built on mutual respect and genuine understanding. "It's perfect," she whispered, admiring how the pearl caught the late afternoon light. "I'll treasure it always." Hand in hand, they walked back toward the ranch house, where Rebecca waited on the porch as though she'd known exactly what was happening among the apple trees. "Well?" she called as they approached, her expression hopeful. Owen's smile was answer enough, but Fiona held up her hand, the pearl ring glinting in the sunlight. Rebecca's joyful whoop shattered the peaceful evening as she rushed down the steps to embrace them both. "Finally!" she exclaimed, hugging Fiona tightly. "I was beginning to think my brother would never work up the courage to ask." "Hey now," Owen protested good-naturedly. "I was being respectful, giving Fiona time, and I appreciated it," Fiona assured him, squeezing his hand. "But Rebecca's right. I've been ready to say yes for quite some time now." The three of them entered the house together, the simple log structure already feeling like home to Fiona, in a way that the house on Maple Street never had, despite all her carefully sewn curtains and hopes for the future. Here, among these good people, on this land that Owen had claimed and tamed through sheer determination, Fiona Porter had found not just healing but transformation. The woman who had walked barefoot and heartbroken down a dusty Wyoming road would soon walk confidently down a different path as Fiona Young, rancher's wife, partner, beloved. The wedding took place on a perfect October day, with aspens turning gold against the blue Wyoming sky and the first apples ripening in the young orchard. Unlike Fiona's previous wedding plans, this ceremony was simple and intimate, held in the Porter family parlor with only close friends and family in attendance. Fiona wore a new dress of ivory silk, modest but becoming, with Rebecca's lace shawl as her something borrowed. Her mother's pearl earrings complemented Owen's mother's ring, creating a tangible connection between past and future, between the family she'd been born to and the one she was joining. Owen, standing tall and handsome in a new black suit, watched with wonder as Fiona came to stand beside him before the minister. His whispered, "You're beautiful," was for her ears alone, a private moment in the public ceremony. The vows they exchanged were traditional in wording but profound in meaning, each word spoken with clear conviction and complete understanding of the commitment being made. When Owen slipped a simple gold band onto Fiona's finger to join his mother's pearl ring, his hands were steady, his eyes unwavering in their devotion. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared, his voice warm with approval. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Owen's kiss was gentle, respectful of their audience, yet containing a promise of the deeper passion they would share in private. As they turned to face their well-wishers as Mr. and Mrs. Young, Fiona felt a sense of rightness so profound it brought tears to her eyes. The celebration that followed was joyful but modest, a dinner at the Porter home, then a wagon ride to the ranch that would now be Fiona's home as well. Rebecca had tactfully arranged to stay with friends in town for a few days, giving the newlyweds privacy to begin their married life together. As Owen carried Fiona across the threshold of the ranch house, now decorated with Rebecca's touches for the occasion, fresh flowers on the table, new curtains at the windows, a colorful quilt on the bed they would share, he paused, looking down at his bride with earnest eyes. "Welcome home, Mrs. Young," he said softly. "Home," Fiona repeated, the word holding new meaning now. "Our home." That night, as they discovered each other with tender passion, Fiona gave thanks for the painful journey that had led her to this man, this place, this love that felt as vast and enduring as the Wyoming sky. 5 years later, Fiona Young stood on the porch of the expanded ranch house, watching her husband and 3-year-old son inspect the apple trees that now stood tall and productive in neat rows across what had once been empty pasture. Little Jacob, named for Fiona's father, toddled alongside Owen, his small hand trustingly in his father's larger one, his dark hair catching the late afternoon sunlight. "Daddy, up!" Jacob demanded, raising his arms toward the lowest branches where early summer apples were beginning to form. Owen obliged, lifting the boy onto his shoulders with practiced ease. "See those, son? By your birthday, they'll be big and red and sweet." "For me?" Jacob asked, his eyes wide with the importance of this personalized crop. "Some for you, some for Mama, some for Aunt Rebecca, and some to sell in town," Owen explained patiently. "That's how the ranch works. We share what we grow." Fiona smiled, one hand resting on her swelling belly where their second child, a daughter, she was certain grew steadily beneath her heart. At her feet, a half-finished basket of mending testified to her intention to work while watching her men, an intention abandoned in favor of simply enjoying the sight of them together among the trees she and Owen had planted in those early days of their relationship. So much had changed in 5 years. The ranch had prospered beyond their most optimistic projections, thanks in part to Fiona's careful management of their finances and Owen's intelligent stewardship of the land. The original cabin had been expanded into a comfortable home with a proper bedroom for Jacob, a nursery for the coming baby, and even a small study where Fiona kept the ranch accounts and, 2 mornings a week, tutored local children whose families lived too far from town to attend the school regularly. Rebecca had married last year a widowed rancher from the next valley with 2 young daughters who adored their new stepmother. She lived close enough to visit often, her happiness adding to the joy Fiona felt in her own life. As for Harrison Wells, he had eventually married Beatrice Holloway as planned, though town gossip suggested the partnership was more successful in business than in personal terms. Fiona encountered them occasionally in town and could now greet them with genuine indifference, the pain of that long-ago rejection having transformed into gratitude for the path it had ultimately led her down. "What are you thinking about? Looking so serious over there?" Owen called, noticing her thoughtful expression as he and Jacob made their way back toward the house. "Just counting my blessings," Fiona replied with a smile, making room on the porch as they climbed the steps to join her. Owen set Jacob down, and the boy immediately went to his mother, placing a small grubby hand on her rounded belly. "Baby sister kick?" "Not right now," Fiona told him, smoothing his hair affectionately. "She's sleeping." "Like me at nap time," Jacob said with the solemnity of a child making important connections. "Exactly like that," Owen agreed, settling beside Fiona on the porch bench and draping an arm around her shoulders. "Though your mother would say you're much more resistant to the idea." Fiona leaned into her husband's embrace, breathing in the familiar scent of him. Sunshine and leather and the soap she made herself from rendered beef fat and lavender. "He comes by it honestly. His father never wants to rest either." Owen grinned, dropping a kiss on her temple. "Too much to do. Too much to see." Jacob, already distracted from the conversation, had spotted a butterfly and was now attempting to follow it across the yard, his chubby legs working furiously. "Not too far," Owen called, though he made no move to get up, trusting the boy to stay within the safe confines of the ranch yard as he'd been taught. They sat together in companionable silence, watching their son's adventures in the golden late afternoon light. From inside the house came the aroma of the stew Fiona had started earlier, promising a satisfying end to a productive day. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is my life," Fiona said softly. "That day on the road, when everything seemed broken beyond repair. I never imagined I could find such happiness. Owen's arm tightened around her shoulders. I knew, he said simply. The moment I saw you, barefoot and beautiful even in your grief, something in me recognized something in you. Like we were two halves of something that belonged together. My night on horseback, Fiona teased gently, though the memory still held power that moment when Owen had lifted her onto his horse, offering sanctuary when she needed it most. Hardly that, Owen demurred. Just a man lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time. Fiona turned to face him fully, her hand coming up to trace the beloved contours of his face, the strong jaw now sporting a neatly trimmed beard, the laugh lines deepening at the corners of his eyes, the mouth that could be firm in determination or soft with tenderness. I love you, Owen Young, she said, the words no less powerful for having been spoken countless times over their years together. Every day, in every way, I love you more. Owen's eyes, those whiskey-colored eyes that had first looked at her with such concern on a dusty Wyoming road, now shone with the depth of emotion that came from years of shared joys and sorrows, triumphs and challenges, daily kindnesses, and passionate nights. And I love you, Fiona Young, he replied, his voice husky with feeling. You are the heart of this place, the center of our home, my greatest blessing. Their kiss was brief but profound, a reaffirmation of vows both spoken and unspoken. As they drew apart, Jacob's delighted laughter drew their attention back to their son, now attempting to catch grasshoppers in the tall grass beyond the porch. I should finish dinner, Fiona said reluctantly, not quite ready to leave this perfect moment. I'll watch him, Owen assured her, his hand gently caressing the swell of their coming daughter. Take your time. As Fiona rose and moved toward the door, she paused to look back at the tableau before her, her husband watching their son with quiet pride, their home solid and welcoming behind them, the orchard stretching toward the horizon in neat, productive rows. From barefoot grief to this abundant joy, a journey she could never have imagined that day, when a cowboy lifted her onto his horse and carried her toward a future brighter than any she could have dreamed.